Paul Marston.
Thank you, Ms Stories. It's a real pleasure to follow my honourable friend for Croydon South, although, as always, the problem with following him is that he's done such a thorough and detailed job going through the minutiae of pretty much every single piece of the legislation in front of us. There's not a huge amount left for me to say that he's not already covered, but I will, of course, do my best to do so and raise a few points that I know of are particular importance to people and businesses, particularly small businesses in East Renfrewshire. One of the reasons, of course, that these measures before us are so important is because this comes back to that ultimate perception of fairness. The reason that taking action on tax avoidance and tax evasions is important is because people often get a perception that they're playing by the rules, they're doing everything right, but other guys, often the big guys with lots of money, the people who can afford to pay the big four huge sums of money to go through and find clever ways to reduce tax liability, are able to do things. That's why we've seen so many big issues with all these companies who've diverted profits in a way that isn't fair and isn't right off to another jurisdiction with much lower tax levels to save themselves money, taking money that was produced as a result of taxpayers in this country buying their goods, going into their shops, supporting those products, supporting those businesses, and yet that's not being kept in our economy or being reinvested in our economy. It's being shunted offshore to another jurisdiction and swept up, often being manoeuvred around other areas, particularly where you're looking at a global business, being moved around to prop up often other less competitive and less successful areas of the business offshore. So when we're looking at around about £180 billion since 2010 in extra money brought in through some of the measures that we've seen, that's a huge amount of money that's being reinvested back into the country into which that money was produced. That's more money for our schools, our hospitals, for our small businesses, the sort of money that's able to give people a bit of a break. And so I do very much welcome the measures that are in this bill. I also wanted to touch briefly on the Honourable Lady from Glasgow Central's amendment. She talks quite frequently and with a lot of knowledge about Scottish Limited Partnerships, and I think quite rightly, because I think they are becoming increasingly under the spotlight and increasingly under scrutiny. They've been around for a very long time and nobody ever really paid very much attention to them. Nobody really understood what they were being used for. They kind of fall within a slightly odd grey area in terms of how the Companies Act 2006 works. I used to use them in my old job as a pensions lawyer because we used them as a vehicle to allow companies to effectively put an extra step between them and an investment, and it helped them in terms of tax reduction in terms of the employer contributions that they paid in for the funding sweeping round. Now that was a legitimate funding mechanism, but there's absolutely no question that because of where Scottish Limited Partnerships sit in terms of the wider tax system, they are being used pretty unscrupulously, and there's been a lot more stuff coming out on these, and I do think she is right to continue probing and testing at this point as to whether how these are being used is being properly enforced and properly checked. Of course I will.
I'm glad to see him agreeing with me on Scottish Limited Partnerships. Would you agree, though, that the whole scope of this needs to be investigated and the Government needs to bring its consultation report back? Because it's clear that where one loophole gets closed, another one's opening. And there seems to be some evidence that people are moving to Northern Ireland to try and get around the rules now as well. So the Government really needs to bring forward something very soon before people jump over and do something else.
Yeah, I think the Honourable Lady highlights really the key point, coming back to something I said at the start about these very highly trained and highly well-paid accountants, is that the Government's always playing catch-up, because she's exactly right. What happens is you identify a loophole. It takes you quite a long time to get something through the process to close it, but actually by the time you close it, everybody's already moved on to the next thing. And I do think that one of the things that we need to get better at is actually pinpointing, almost like a game of chess, thinking 2 moves ahead. Well, actually, if we close this down, where are they going to move next? Because there is no reason why, when these people exist in the private sector, able to find these things, that money saving, that there shouldn't be people working within government who can't be thinking along the same lines and same thought process. So I do think that what this government is trying to do to reduce the tax gap, that's important, to bring in this extra money which is properly due in this country, to try and avoid these loopholes, to stop that feeling that the big corporate guy is getting away with something that me, the guy struggling with my own small business, paying what is due, is a real sense of pervading unfairness that these measures are designed to tackle, and I very much look forward to supporting them in 4.5 minutes' time.